Hello and welcome back. In this episode I'm going to show you how you can create a brand new empty ASP.NET Core web application and how you can add IdentityServer into that empty web application. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to create a brand new solution. I'm going to call the solution IdentityServer, like so. And you're going to want to select an ASP.NET Core web application. You're going to leave the type as just empty, and then I'll leave all of the other defaults as they are. Once you've got these options selected, you can hit the Create button, and this will create us a brand new solution and an empty ASP.NET Core web application within that solution. So, you can see here, over on the left-hand side, we have a brand new empty web application. And first things first, I'll just take you through these default files that it creates for us. So, the launch settings.json contains the launch profiles that you can use to run the application. You'll notice that inside this profiles object, it creates two profiles for us. One profile called ISExpress and one profile called IdentityServer. The ISExpress profile can be used to run the application using ISExpress, and the IdentityServer configuration can be used to run the application using the default Kestrel framework. You'll notice in the top right, I have two run configurations. IdentityServer here, which corresponds to this highlighted profile, and IdentityServer ISExpress, which corresponds to this first ISExpress profile. Moving on from the launch settings, we have the two app settings files. AppSettings.json is used for our production app settings, and AppSettings.development.json is used for our development app settings. You could also create app settings files for other environments, for example AppSettings.staging.json for your staging environment. Moving on, we have the program file, which contains the main static void method, and this is essentially what runs the web application. We'll just leave that as the default for now. However, the bulk of the logic happens inside this startup class. You can see we have a configure services method and a configure method. Now, because this is an empty ASP.NET Core web application, there are no services being configured in the application, so this method is empty for now. At the bottom, however, you can see that we do some configuration to the application. If the environment is development, then we specify that we want to use the developer exception page in order to better diagnose any exceptions that might occur. Next up, we specify that we're using routing, and we then also set use endpoints, and we map a get endpoint with just the root path to a response of hello world. If I now run this application, give it a few moments to build, this should launch the browser and we should see hello world like so. And that's because this default get endpoint at the root path is setting a response of hello world to be written to the browser. Now we can stop that application running, and we can then right click the IdentityServer project and click on Manage NuGet Packages. And what we will do now is install the IdentityServer package. You'll notice there are several packages, for example Entity Framework, ASP.NET Identity, amongst others. However, for now, we will just use the base IdentityServer package. What we'll do is hit that plus, hit install, and you can see that package is now installed into our project. What we can do now, inside this configure services method, we can say services.add IdentityServer, like so. And this will add IdentityServer into our application's services. It will configure the appropriate dependencies and inject all of the IdentityServer based middleware into our application. Next up, we can get rid of this use routing and use endpoints, and we can simply say app.use IdentityServer. Now, if we run the application, give it a few moments to build, you'll notice that we get a lot of exceptions logged into the output console. If we scroll up to the very top, you can see that we have an aggregate exception with some services are not able to be constructed. And that is because we need to configure a couple of extra services on top of the identity server. What we can do is we can say add in-memory clients with just an empty list of clients, and we can say add in-memory API scopes with an empty list of API scopes. You'll notice if I come in and inspect these methods, the add in-memory clients method is adding the in-memory client store to our dependency injection framework. And you'll also notice add in-memory API scopes is adding the in-memory resource store into our dependency injection container. So like I say, add IdentityServer will bring in the majority of the services, etc. into our dependency injection container. However, we also need to add the in-memory client store and also the in-memory resource store on top of the default IdentityServer services. If we now run this application again, give it a few moments to build, and you'll notice that we now have the browser launching back to just that root homepage. However, this time we have a 404 response, and that's because at the bottom of our configure method we got rid of that default root that was writing hello world to the output. However, IdentityServer, much like most OAuth and OpenID Connect identity providers, gives us a well-known discovery endpoint. You can navigate to this URL by typing /well-gnome/openid-configuration. And this displays all of the metadata that's associated with your IdentityServer application. You can see here we have an issuer of localhost port 5001. We have an authorization endpoint of localhost 5001/connect/authorize, and a token endpoint of, again, localhost port 5001/connect/token. And what client applications can do, rather than hard coding all of these URL values, they can simply send a GET request to this discovery endpoint, and they can then get the appropriate values out of this JSON response. That allows your IdentityServer to be much more dynamic and also saves client applications from having to hard code these URLs and potentially change them if your URL that you're running the IdentityServer on changes over time. So that's shown you really how to create a brand new empty ASP.NET Core web application and how to literally add a very basic bare bones IdentityServer application into that project. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.